Niamh going on his own. He gets the try.
The Red 78.
We're both Munster people.
The referee gets over the line. Try for Munster.
Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
Hello and welcome along. I'm Alan Quinlan and you're listening to episode 65 of the Red 78 here on the Rugby channel. And a little bit of a glum, disappointed looking Niamh Briggs is with me. Sorry, I don't mean that in a bad way, Niamh, but you look a bit tired, frustrated. Tough weekend again for you guys, and also for Munster, of course, which were the main bulk of the podcast is going to be about. So how was Saturday? I think we were talking last week, and big scoreline against France. Probably to lose the match was always going to be really difficult to beat France, but some positives to take out of it. You've got to go back to the drawing board and review that again. I'm sure your review's done, but what was your take on Saturday in your game in Cork?
Yeah, look, in a weird way, there was actually so much better than Wales in terms of we were definitely more resilient within the group. I think we fought really hard, but ultimately, we just made too many mistakes. And when you cough up possession and miss so many tackles against a team like France, you just, you're going to get punished. You're going to get punished in international rugby at every single stage, but especially against the good sides like France's, England's, etc. So big learning curve for us. Proud of how the girls worked through it, but also we've got to get past the point of these moral victories. So incredibly frustrated, especially when I looked back on the video. We were created a lot of our own downfall at times. I think that's the most frustrating part, but definitely some green shoots compared to Wales. So a weird kind of mixed emotion after that week, but as you say, review is done now. I'm ready to go, and we have a few days off, thank God, in terms of players need to mentally and physically refresh themselves. Coaching group need to mentally refresh as well, and I think once you can do that away from the environment, it probably helps you a little bit. So I'm actually looking forward now. I kind of feel like I'm done now in terms of I'm ready to go again. I've had my couple of days where I've gone over the game and stuff, so looking forward to getting back into camp again.
That's the tough part of coaching, isn't it? That's kind of a roller coaster. And what can you do better, do you think, Nave, in your preparation now for between now and the Italian match? France are at a different level. We all know that. I think maybe the sending off wasn't. Sometimes it works for you, and sometimes psychologically it can have the opposite effect where you expect things to happen a little bit. I'm not saying the girls did that, but you thought that was a bit of an advantage for you guys. But France are an exceptional side. Let's call it a spade. Their power, their physicality, their skill levels, superb.
At one stage, they turned the ball over inside their own half, and they just went. And I was standing on the sideline, and I was like, "Oh Jesus!" Like, as in the pace that they attacked at, the ability to be able to know where the space was. Their core skills are so good.
Have they gotten better, Nave? You know what I mean? We're trying to close the gap. You and your team and coaches and players are trying to close the gap. A lot of young players in there. So the gap, sometimes when the gap is at a certain level, the best teams, they get better and better and better. So you're chasing them. And we're chasing France, we're chasing England. Wales have gone up a level. Are they getting better? And is the gap getting a little bit bigger? And what way do you see that?
Everybody's improving. And we're just not at the same level as those teams. I think we're still trying to implement a professional program. We're still trying to educate players on high performance, on being able to back sessions up, on being robust and resilient in terms of being able to go again. We've got to improve. We're improving, but it's just not at the rate that everybody wants, I think, or everybody expects. And but we can see from an internal side of things, when you take your emotional hat off and look at the process, you can see loads of improvements. I can see loads of improvements, especially not being a full-time employee, whereas when you're in it, it can be difficult to see it. But you definitely do see things. It's just that it's at a different level of those other countries.
And do you think the girls feel that themselves? Okay, it's hard to lose these matches, and do you think they feel that kind of bit of light is there at the end of the tunnel, that they are gonna? That's where you want to go. There's no guarantees with any sporting team. And is there anything else you could do different, or what needs to change going forward? Do you need more support from the RFU? Do you need better structures? Do you need more time with the girls? Do you need the more girls to be in that full-time environment?
Yeah, look, there's loads of bugs to that answer in terms of.
There's about 5 questions in there, to be fair. So my apologies.
I do. For number one, there was definitely a moment after the game where younger players stood in that circle, and it wasn't the Nicola and it wasn't the coaching group, and said, like, we're in this, like we are in this. We stood together, we were better, and with an understanding, and that's not to sound patronizing, but an understanding of where we are as a group, but that we showed up this weekend. I think that was really, really important from a physical point of view and from a work rate point of view. From a what has to be done, there's loads of things in that. Look, you can't have more time together. It's not really possible from a point of view when you have players playing in the UK. You know what Regulation 9 is. You don't get released to only in certain international windows. But also we've got to make sure that our domestic game is getting stronger all the time. I think this is it. We won't bear the fruit of all this hard work that's going on in the background for another couple of years. I've been saying that since maybe 2 or 3 years ago in relation to it's going to take a 5 or 6 years where we can actively compete at international level, where you're not expecting girls to be learning at international games that they're coming having learned and developed and are able to probably live at that intensity and that environment. And I think that's a really unfair thing to be asking young girls to do at the moment, but we've kind of been in a situation where we don't really have a choice. Whereas when I look at that under 18 squad that was announced yesterday, and I watched all those girls at inter-pro level, it gives me great hope that in 2 or 3 years' time, what's coming through married with what's there now, it's very exciting, and it's a product of what's happened over the last few years. Now, you and I could sit here and we can talk about whether, things that went wrong 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it frustrates me that we got to keep looking back in order to move forward. And we have to come to a point, we as a group have definitely done so, that we start looking forward as opposed to what's happened before, and we start building now as opposed to giving out of things that have gone on previously. So
no, I agree with that, because look, if you keep going back, you're never going to move forward. And it's
I think
tough.
The narrative out there is frustrating, because it feels like that we're constantly looking back. Like, it's funny, we sat in the dressing room after the game, and myself and Greg were chatting, and like Greg and I have been there in the 2008s and 9s where people didn't know that we played rugby, and we were getting bet quite well, and then you got certain things happen to a group that galvanizes the group, and then people sit up and take notice, and within a few years of that, you're winning a Grand Slam. I'm not saying that's going to happen. What I'm saying is that now it's different because it's out in television and there's more people are aware, and there's there's social media element and everything, so it's just more in the limelight,
and lots more people have a voice, and
and they're entitled to it.
Some of those
100%.
voices on social media are very negative, they're critical, they're unfair, and some of it is positive and along the lines of what you're saying, but look, it is what it is. At the moment, you're in a very high I suppose pressurized, competitive tournament, and it's about building, and that's the reality. And as I said, I do think, looking back and blaming the RFU for this, that, or the other, or structural stuff that went on, is not going to make a huge difference at this stage. But the girls need more support. They need more structures. We need more players playing the game, and we certainly need more support.
More competition.
More competition. With the stuff that came out of the report needs to be implemented, and all that stuff needs to it takes a little bit of time. Okay, it's a tough one for you. Hard being a coach in these days. I hope we're not talking to you about this for the next few weeks, and that you get a situation where your performance can improve and maybe get a positive results when you go to Italy. Let's move on to the Munster game. I put a message tweet out yesterday. A lot of people have responded to that. Some of it is close to the bone. Some of it is a lot of that is justified. I think there's a bit of a frustration there, a bit of an eye opener at what happened at the weekend, and probably not just what happened at the weekend. Previous week against Scarlet or against Glasgow, and then the Scarlets game conceding how many tries against? Yeah, so 6 tries conceded against Scarlets, 5 against Glasgow, and 7 against the Sharks. A lot of people reference the defence and the system breakdowns there and guys doing individual stuff. But ultimately, power, aggression, pace, physicality played a big part. The heat played a big part. It was 28, 29 degrees in Durban. The humidity was very high. And a lot of people commenting on the Munster team coming out after half-time looking fairly tired and fatigued. They looked wrecked. Like, look, pictures can be deceiving. If you look at the stats of the game, and stats do lie. I talk about them a lot. You know, Munster at 57% possession, at 58% territory. So that's where you want to be as a coach. You want to try and have the ball as much as you can. They had 110 carries to 72 with the Sharks. 24 defenders beaten, 6 clean breaks, 125 passes. This was the one that jumped out at me. And the Sharks had 55 passes. And it wasn't that long ago, well, it's a year and a half now, when we went back to that Connacht match. So Munster had 45 passes in the
43,
game.
yeah. Something
like that. And Craig Casey had 28 of them. So that was a real indicator of the type of performance that night and the lack of moving the ball and variation. 55 passes from the Sharks. So you probably, the other side of that is you don't have to pass it that much if you're making line breaks and you're scoring maul tries and you're scoring off in, 4th, 5th, 6th phase of play.
Out of curiosity there, Quinny, does it give you a stat on kicks? How often the Sharks kicked compared to Munster?
Well, Sharks kicked 22 times and Munster kicked it 16 times.
Yeah, there's a big thing rolling around about teams that kick more on a greater percentage often win the game. I think Leicester worked off that last year.
Yeah. So it's the type of kicks and getting the ball back and contestables and all that and territorial stuff, turning the opposition, then having a really strong set piece that you can go after the opposition line out, all that stuff. So that's very, very multi-layered. But with Munster kicking the ball 16 times, you would think, I don't know, when you look back at it, should they have kicked a bit more? Possibly. You're trying to come up against a very strong physical 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th phase defensive setup. You're not fatiguing that defensive line. So there was a lot to that. Let's get on to we can go back to some of the stats, but look, it was a very, very disappointing result for Munster, to say the least. It was always going to be a tough challenge.
Yeah.
I think some people got lulled into the fact that the Sharks were really poor in Scarlets the week before. But when you put their team on paper, it's half the Springbok team,
scary.
more than half.
Yeah. Funny, after our game and then obviously the Munster game, I sat in my house reviewing our game and started to think genuinely, how do you cope with power? Because we were overpowered big time against France, and therefore when you're overpowered you end up missing a huge amount of tackles. And I just felt like Munster were the exact same. They got to see the first half before I left to go to Munster Park, and my overriding thought getting onto the bus was Munster are going to do really well not to get a big score put up against them, even though it was only 17-14. But I felt they had exerted so much energy in trying to retain the ball at the breakdown, in trying to physically get over the gain line at times, that they were going to run on fumes. And unfortunately, that was the case.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think we'll go into that a little bit more in a few minutes. But I think speed of movement is one thing. So in other words, if you carry the ball, you have to have 2 guys really quickly. So technique can sometimes be the dominant factor at breakdowns. So in other words, if you're kind of half isolated or a little bit high and your technique is poor, well, a big physical guy can drive you back and counter ruck. If your technique is really good and your speed of movement to get to the ball carrier, support play, and that ruck is quick, well, that's a really positive start. The next ruck quick, the next ruck quick. And then those bigger guys, you know, they're running over and back, over and back. They can't really get that big, massive hit that they want on you. They can't get that slow ruck that they can pile into. That makes a difference for sure. How do you stop a maul of that physicality and that size? Well, again, it's speed of your actions when that liner comes down, to try and disjoint it somewhere and break it up before it gets set. Because when that big maul gets set, so hard then you're on a strength scenario and size scenario, and it's so hard for one or two guys, or if you're a little bit disjointed. So to stop them all, you've got to stop it early, is what I'm trying to say. You know, scrums are more of a you know, they're obviously technique as well, but you want to get the ball in and out of your own scrum as quickly as you can. So one of the common denominators and positives there that you need to do against bigger sides is speed of movement and technique. Obviously, if you're playing in a wet kind of miserable day that you can't get some width in your game, it's harder. You got to kick more then, and then your kick chase has to be superb. So they're just some examples that I would say, and I think, but sometimes it's just really difficult to stop that physicality. It's really difficult. 100%. Let's move on to the tweets and see what the fans think and what their reaction was.
Yeah, so Cian McGivney said Munster will need to regroup and leave any recriminations until the season is ended.
Right, let's just talk on that for a sec. I agree with that. I think if we focus on all what went wrong, we will have more of a review. They've got to pick themselves up quickly here. They've 2 games left, and they're like 2 cup finals from. So I agree with that one. Yeah,
2 huge games to the end of the season. Poor defence in the last few weeks has undone the good work in the last 3 or 4 months. Here's hoping 2 solid showings in South Africa can help seal Euro qualification. Dave Parks thought the breakdown was a free-for-all, and Munster never got up to speed with how Barnes was reffing it. They looked exhausted in the second half. Nash was brilliant. Let's hope Munster take full advantage of the Stormers travelling to Exeter for the quarter-final before we play them. Liam Sheehan, the defence for the last 3 games has been shocking. Not sure if it's structural or individual failure. Munster were destroyed at the breakdown. On a positive note, Crowley looked good even with slow ball. Nash was pure class. John Toohey said, not sure we can fix the defensive issues in time. The number of points conceded in the last 3 matches is troubling. I think we need to beat the Sharks, but another thumping at the Stormers will have destroyed the players' confidence for the following week's game. And then Tom Lonergan said, playing at 20 degrees Celsius midday sunshine was a major factor. Players were blowing coming out for the second half. They didn't prepare for the heat. We're not given a fighting chance. They could have been in South Africa on the Monday and got 4 days of climatization training in, but no. So here's the thing. You either have to go, I don't know if you've ever did this when you were playing, but you either had to go early. I think it's 10 days early.
But they're not at altitude in Durban, so it doesn't have the same factor. But
actually true. Sorry, I forgot about that.
Take out the altitude out. You still the heat. You need to acclimatize to that kind of heat and stuff. You go early with the altitude.
Or late. That was it.
Or
sorry,
late.
I forgot that they were
or you go late on the Friday. So there's loads of examples. When I played on tour in South Africa, we went up to Bloemfontein on the Friday morning to play a test on Saturday. We based ourselves in Cape Town, and that has happened with lots of international teams. So you either go early or go late with the altitude, but the heat is a big factor. So you need to acclimatize to those conditions
that was my
as well.
thought there. Sorry,
Look, it's hard to say they should have went out on a Monday.
What's an extra day? One of the days was cloudy anyway when they got there.
It's the heat that they had to come up
against.
Humidity
more than anything.
And humidity,
Stormers and Sharks have away trips in Europe while we're off this weekend. Should give us more time to recover. 6:15 start is cooler. Score 5 tries again in each of the remaining games will give us try bonus points, and losing bonus points we need to stay in the playoffs. Norman King, that 20 minutes after the break was just a disaster for the first half, like the first half last week. front row badly in need of a rejig next year shows how badly we're missing Byrne too. Martin Bromwell, defence in the last 3 weeks has been poor. We can't let it define the season. They know what's required of them to ensure Champions Cup for next season. They have a chance to right the wrong of last week, which they are capable of. There's bound to be ups and downs along the way. There's lots talking about the front row, Alan, right? So JJ Casey speaks about leaving Cronin and John Ryan go is just awful. The pack were beaten up with some positives, especially Nash and Crowley, and with Thomas Ahern and Dogwood to come back too. Brian Curtis, I find it very frustrating that we refuse to tackle the front row issue. I find it even more frustrating listening to those that think Ryan or Cronin would make a difference. We need nothing short of top international standard front row, and we need to free up the budget to get them.
Yeah, just on the front row. Keenan Knox and Roman Salanoa they're not first timers. They're around for a couple of seasons for sure. Keenan Knox is there longer than Roman. I think they're good players who haven't been exposed to top level games on a regular basis. I still think they're still learning. Even some people might say, well, they're not young fellas anymore. They're relatively young as regards experience of playing at the top level and playing at the coalface against other international props. I do think more reinforcements are needed in the front row. James Cronin and John Ryan, a lot of people mentioned that online, not to us in the podcast as well. I'm reading it elsewhere. James Cronin is flying with Leicester, and John Ryan obviously has done really well and shown his quality before he left. He's with the Chiefs as well and doing quite well there. They're homegrown guys. Budget wise, though, at one stage I think you had Dave Kilcoyne, Jeremy Lockman, James Cronin, and I think they were all on fairly high enough contracts. Archer and Keenan Knox, and I'm not sure what other front rows were there. Roman is there 2 years, but you do. A lot of people keep saying it. The hooker scenario: Niall Scannell, Diarmuid Byrne, Scott Buckley, and then you have Chris Moore, who's with Young Munster. We haven't seen him at all. I believe. I don't know what Chris Moore is like. I haven't seen him in the AIL. But with all due respect to all those players, most top club teams or top URC teams or Champions Cup teams that you're coming up against international front rows that are playing regularly international. And these big games, then they have them. We saw Glasgow with them back last week, and the difference they make. Fraser Brown and Fagerson. They're playing with Scotland the week before, so they're top. They're internationals. They're current internationals.
Yeah.
So the group we have are very low on the number of caps, bar Dave Kilcoyne, but he's not starting for Ireland. He's a very good player, but we need 3 or 4 guys who are in the international squad. That's ideally what you want to get to. That's what Leinster have. It's very hard to attain that by just going. It takes time. It takes quality. It takes brilliant players coming through, and they haven't come through. So the front row is an issue. What do you do about it? I still think that's an area that Munster need to, and it's easy for people on the outside and for me or you or anyone else to say. It's very easy to say, well, go out and sign a new tight head that will bring Keenan Knox on and Roman Salanoa and have them learning from someone as well and have them springing off the bench, starting a game, and you have a bit more rotation. But you have, like, you go back to Toulouse last year, Niamh, up in the Aviva Stadium. The scrum, we didn't lose the game. We ended up going out in penalties, but the scrum was a massive issue. So when you get to the business end of the season, you're trying to win trophies and trying to make a difference. It does. And I don't want to be.
What are we learning then? I don't think it's.
I don't know what we're learning, but we've signed up the same group for next year. Some of them signed new contracts. John Ryan is coming back. So it is the same scenario. Again, you can't just create a magic wand and get a budget of €1 million and go out and sign 3 or 4 quality players, and you won't be allowed to do it by there. You've got to try and work with what you have at the moment. But I still feel one or one big experienced international. There was talks of the Malcolm Marx. You think Malcolm Marx comes in, he makes a big difference to your two props beside you because he's a scrummaging hooker as well. He's so strong and powerful. And that's not disrespect to Niall Scannell, and he shouldn't be on the team. But Niall Scannell still plays loads of games and he's chomping at the bit. So it actually brings out a fair bit more in him. But look, we could go on about this for ages, but lots of people are talking about the front row. I think if you look at the rest of the forward pack, if you get Thomas Ahern, Edwin Adogbo, Finian Wycherley, RG Snyman, John Klein, there's very good players there. Tyke Byrne, that's 6 guys there that for me can, really push on and help each other and rotate that group. Possibly we need a back rower. A big back rower who's just going to get you over the gain line. I know Gavin Coombs does that, again, relatively inexperienced as regards top class big games, not playing it, in Six Nations internationals. I think that would help. The back line has improved a lot, but I think Munster need 3 players. And if it was me, if I was going out signing someone now, I know we're getting the centre in there and what's his name again?
Alex
Nankivell. Yeah, he's coming in. But I'd go front row player, back row player, and a back 3 player. If you could get 3 more players, it would make a difference. There is some very good young players coming through, but the reality here is, number one, budget financially, the IRFU allowing you do it, and it's not Premiership soccer that you can just go to the transfer window. The worry about this is if we still see the same thing in 12 months' time and we're still talking about the same issues, well, then you're just losing time year after year.
Yeah.
And you're not winning trophies. It's a really tricky one. If Graham Rowntree was given a couple of million and said, go out and sign who you want, yeah, that's different. But it's not. He has to work with what he has. But I still think you can force the situation and try and go, well, look, our situation doesn't change here unless we bring in, and it's about experience and quality. It isn't about getting more numbers. It's about experience and quality, but it's difficult. It's a difficult one.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. Peter O'Flynn just speaks about the conditions being crucial to the performance in South Africa. You could see teams were blown out at half time, was worried for a few of them. Even management in the shade was overheating. Games in South Africa should all be even in kickoffs. Trevor O'Sullivan, the ruck was a major issue. The initial seal was fine, but the second counter ruck from the Sharks and another counter from Sharks was destroying the flow for Casey. Physically, big difference in some of the exchanges. Hopefully they can go back down and get 2 wins.
Just on the weather stuff there, I don't necessarily agree with that. Obviously, it'd be ideal if they were in the evenings and not in the hot weather. But like the South African teams have to come north and play in horrendous conditions through the winter as well that they're not used to. So that balances itself out. This is Champions Cup; it's different. Maybe you could Munster could have argued that point out, but the first half, yeah, there was some good stuff. We'll talk about the positives and negatives. We got to move on. Have you a couple of more or?
No, move on. They're all pretty much talking about the breakdown and Munster's losing that kind of battle. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's I think we're all in pretty much agreement. It isn't about scapegoating people here and going hard on individuals or anything like that. That's not the case. I still think, and I don't want to kind of rock the boat here and kind of create I still think there's structural issues. I still think there's cultural issues as regards standards, the level of desire, understanding, fitness levels. And I think it's hard for the players. I have sympathy for them. I think we've seen a lot of big improvements this year as regards, particularly from the period of November up to 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? We saw a lot of positive stuff. So I think they're getting very good coaching now. I think the coaching and the style of play, you don't hear anyone giving out about the way they're actually attacking and trying to attack. Even Shane Daly's try to start brilliant.
That was brilliant try, by the way.
Yeah, it was brilliant try. So we've scored 7 tries against Scarlets, 4 against Glasgow, and 5 against the Sharks. So that's 16 tries in 3 games. We've conceded 18. So you think, oh God, simple solution. Stop conceding tries and you'll win games. You're scoring 35 points, you're losing, you're scoring 26 last week, and you conceded, you scored 49 against Scarlet. So if we want to look at positives and negatives, which we usually do, the positive for me is obviously the attack has changed. Are we being a bit loose in some of that attack? Possibly. We saw balls going down the other day and some poor execution, and the Sharks went and scored, went up the field and scored tries and made it really difficult for ourselves. So I think the coaching has improved a lot, and I think there's still some very good players there. But just our reality here, Neve, is, and I think for any of the listeners or Munster fans, we need a bit more quality in this team. Whether that comes from young players coming through or superstar players. I always say this to people, and for the listeners, I remember being with John Hayes when Dennis Leamy turned up at training, and both of us went, Jesus, this fella's not just going to play for Munster, he's going to play for Ireland. When Keith Earls turned up to training first, and Keith is still in the squad, he's still around us, had a fantastic career. I remember Hayes and myself chatting again, this fella's going to play for Ireland. You need some young players coming through like that. You need to get a bit of luck. You need the numbers. You need a bit of quality. And I'm sure there is some good young players, and that's what's going on behind the scenes to try and bring these guys through. But anyway, it's frustrating for the Munster fans at the moment because nobody expects us to win a trophy this year. It's not been negative, but it was always going to be difficult. But the key for Munster, for me, was make the playoffs in the URC, and realistically Munster should have been targeting a home quarterfinal in the URC, so be in the top 4. Not like that would have been a defeatist goal for me, saying, oh, we'll be in the top 8. Be in the top 4 and get into the mix in Europe. We're very unlucky. The reality of this as well is very few teams would have went to the Durban on Saturday in that round 16. Any of the other teams that were playing and beating the Sharks, that was, more than half of the Springbok team were there. A lot of quality and power. So there is some positives there. The negatives.
I was thinking about this, a lot in relation to with the Munster stuff. So over the last kind of while, I was kind of in my head, I was like, maybe it's because I'm hanging out with you too much, but I was starting to think about coming towards the end of the season, Munster kind of struggle because of those power and physicality stakes. But
well, you would think it's in another side of it. You think, God, the hot weather, the warm weather, the dry ball, they'll do better. It was
just kind of, for me, it was the quality of player that were coming back in after Six Nations, right? So in my mind, those teams, the Leinsters, La Rochelle's, Sharks, when they're at home, are kind of on the top rung. And then you have the bottom ones that are like, some of the teams from Wales and other teams like that in terms of how they play and the type of players that they have. And for me, Munster's in a little bit of state of flux at the moment. So we've seen them been really, really good against those bottom teams since they've kind of got their mojo since November, right? Start of the season was always going to be difficult. But I feel like they're not quite at the top tier. They're definitely not at the bottom. They're just kind of in a little bit of flux. And I think Munster getting a top 6 in the URC and getting out of the pool was probably a fair reflection on where they are as a group.
Yeah, but that flux you're talking about, Neve, how many years has that been going on? And I'm not saying here that
I know it
should be better. You've no divine right. Just because Munster have been successful in the past,
I just think other teams are those top tier, bit like, it's going to sound stupid, but a bit like a women's game for us at the moment. The top tier are getting better and stronger all the time because of
we
more
lost
financial backing, and we lost time.
We lost time doing the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
Recruitment wasn't good enough. I got vilified in 2016 for talking about structural stuff. It was never meant to be. I don't even want to. Every time I bring this up, I say I don't want to bring it up, but it's the reality. I was frustrated by recruitment, by standard of player being signed from overseas, by the quality of players getting contracts, by academy players coming through accountability right across the board. And, you know, Axel was the coach at the time, and he was one of my closest friends in rugby. And I had a rant. It was just frustration that came out. So I think there's a lot of positive stuff that's happened. And I really believe that if you put on a Munster jersey, you've got to bring passion and pride to that jersey every time, and emotion. This group have, you know, started the season incredibly poorly. I think they've found a little bit of spark. Do they need more quality? Yes. But I think no matter what happens, you know, you have 2 games left. They're incredibly difficult. They've dug this kind of hole for themselves, that they put themselves in this position of having to go and win one of these games. And that's mainly down to the start. I think the positives as well are the coaches that have come in. I like Graham Rowntree a lot. I think he's very calm and assured, friendly. Dennis, Andy Kiriakou, George Murray's involved there as well, who's been around for a long time, knows the setup. But I just think maybe we got a little bit too far ahead of ourselves, because if you look
I just think that when you're looking at games like last weekend, it's very difficult from a coaching point of view in order to probably think about, you know, what it takes to win that game. In order to win a game like Saturday, you needed every single player that took to that park to have the game in their lives. So when you go into these situations where you're going up against teams, irrelevant of what's happened from a Munster point of view years ago, talking about the Munster group now, even though we've seen so many brilliant green shoots I love how they're playing right now. In terms of their attack shape, I think it's absolutely class. I love the fact that they're being brave and how they're looking. Like that Gavin Coombs pass for Shane Daly, like that wouldn't have been thrown a year and a half ago. Like that was just so good. But you needed everybody to have the game of their lives last weekend.
That's basic stuff as well. That I would think they all need to. That's the stuff that would have frustrated me as well. I just think, Neve, the reality here is they need to obviously get better. There's been issues around, for me, fitness at the start of the season was not good enough, speed of movement, all that kind of stuff. So,
but they've improved so much, Quinny.
Yeah, they've been improved from an endurance point of view, but I still think they need to get more powerful. And that comes from the gym and the type of training they're doing in pre-season.
Yeah, but that takes time.
That's where you've only one window of that, and that's your pre-season. We saw pre-season last year where it was trained for 2 weeks, a week off, trained for 2 weeks. Peter O'Mahony's wedding, everyone's off for a week. Then you a week and a half later, you've 5.5, 4 and 5 weeks for pre-season with 2 week offs. I never had a week off in a pre-season in all the times I did pre-season. Horrendous time for professional players. But anyway, let's park that. We'll move on. Any positives? The positives for me, just quickly, because we're running out of time. Positives for me is the performance in the first half. I think the heat did play a factor, and there is loads of mitigation for that group that went out there. There's no player went on the field on Saturday to go, well, you know, I'm not going to try my hardest here. And I do agree with you, to win that game on Saturday, you need guys with a rating of 8 and 9 out of 10. Everyone across the board. I still think that there's players making poor decisions defensively, and they're really hurting the team. They're shooting out of the line individually. They're getting their timing wrong. You know, when, like I said at the start, when you're up against a powerful side, you need unity in defence.
Connections,
so in other words,
yeah. 100%.
You're making the tackle, Nave. I'm your support on the outside or inside. I'm helping you now. If that player steps you, I'm on the inside to make the tackle.
Yeah.
There's guys doing a lot of individual stuff, and I'm sure it's
lots
frustrating.
of hips turning in. I think that was the most frustrating part. Yeah. It's not been squared.
So look, the positive.
We just got to talk about Cavan Nash's performance.
The positives were the try scored, the effort level in the first half. I think fatigue, conditions, and power played a big part in the second half, and the breakdown was a big issue. So I think technically they were poor at the breakdown, and they kind of didn't stay on the task in hand. They were too high. They were getting counter-rucked a lot, and guys being in. So it comes from some of that fatigue as well. But look, we've got to bin it. They've 2 weeks left. Let's move on to the star of the week very, very quickly. You said his name there. It has to be Calvin Nash. I think he's one of the most improved players in this group. I think his rugby intelligence has improved. I think that's obviously helped by the fact that Prendy has got time with him. He's taken him, and the
But
other
it's also
backs.
consistently playing week in, week out.
Yeah, but his decision making is superb compared to.
Yeah, but you only get that from learning on that stage. My biggest fear is that when I looked at that performance the other day, I thought to myself, Jesus, Calvin could be a board for that World Cup squad. I just think he's exceptionally quick and, he's strong on the ball as well. When he carries into contact, we don't often lose it. But Munster are finished in a couple of weeks' time. That just allows others from the likes of Leinster's to be ahead of him, like the Jordan Larmour and stuff like that. They're more in the eye at higher level games. But I just think he's at whatever happens in terms of that World Cup squad, I think he needs to sit back after the season and go, okay, that's my base level now for next season. I want to go and I want to go and I want to go. And then, hopefully international honours will follow, because I just thought he's had such a good season.
Yeah, he had a really good game. I think it's hard to pick out too many. Jack Crowley had moments that he looks quality. I think it's tough on Joey Carberry. He's in a kind of a position now of, not getting selected there on Saturday. It's a tough one for him. I still believe in Joey Carberry. I think there's a lot of quality there in him. But across the board, as you said, too many players just didn't have that 8 or 9 out of 10 performance, and the Sharks were very, very good. So it's a pity they're out of Europe. I said to you last week, I would have preferred if it was a league game this last weekend. They've no game this week. It gives them a chance to recuperate a little bit, and then they travel next week to play the Stormers and then the Sharks. So we'll finish on kind of a positive note, even though we're kind of bouncing from positives to negatives there. There is issues. There is this team needs to get better. Munster as an organisation still needs to improve and get better at certain things. Strength and conditioning for me is going to be an absolute key this summer.
Yeah,
fitness levels, getting more power, and getting the younger players to really find their pain threshold as regards fitness, conditioning, and getting that stuff in the tank for the season. The start last year, and it's there for everybody to see. Lost to Cardiff round 1, lost to Cardiff round 2, 21-5 against Ebury in round 3. There's a point left behind you there, a bonus point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That 1 point could make all the difference. Beaten 20 points 11, deservedly so, by a very good Connacht side that night in Galway. Responded with a performance against the Bulls and got a bonus point win. But then you had Leinster away, which was, it's your back is against the wall. They're so strong, beaten 27-13 by Leinster. And then the loss to Ulster in Thomond Park, 15-14. They atoned for that by getting the win in January, I think, but that's again another game. So there's at least 2 or 3 games there, I think, that should have been wins for Munster. And I actually think pre-season didn't help that, because really it was from the 10th of November onwards, that South African game, that we started to see that speed of movement, that attack structure getting better, that fitness level, that work rate from players in attack. So there's been a very good run. Last 2 weeks have been poor, but can they pick themselves up just finally for the trip to Stormers? Or are we hoping the Stormers beat Exeter and that they're kind of going at 2 fronts, and that they're in Europe? Unfortunately, they're not secure that second place yet. They're 2 points
they're not
behind
secure.
Ulster, and Ulster have 2 home games, so I think Ulster will win them. So they do play, is it Benetton in the last game, Stormers? So they're not going to put out a second string against Munster.
I don't think they will.
Team. But if they win in Europe, no matter whether you want to or not, there's a bit of rotation that's going to have to happen. But I think Munster can't focus on that. Maybe they're better off play a full set Stormers side and just go for it. It's going to be really difficult. Stormers have been brilliant this season, really consistent. The Sharks have been up and down a bit. But there is a danger here, and we can't get away from it, that Munster miss out in Europe next year. If they finish 8th, right, they're in the playoffs.
But Wales will jump. A Welsh team will jump them. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you finish 8th, a Welsh team, which will be Cardiff, looks like Cardiff. They've got to get into Europe because of their pool. They'd be top of their pool, so you could miss out in Europe. It's a tricky couple of weeks. they've got to dust themselves down. I still think there's a good squad there. There's good players there that, you know, obviously you would like to get a bit of recruitment in there and improve. Graham Roundtree's hands are tied a little bit, but maybe they can figure out a way of getting someone in. John Ryan coming back will help as well. And I still think some of those front rows will get better. And I'm really enthusiastic about Rue and Quinn, Brian Gleeson, maybe getting them into the group and bringing a different kind of energy as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it's a reality check for all of us that we've had a very good run from November up to this point. Let's hope it doesn't peter out now and that we're not finished our podcast in 2 weeks either as well.
That's the hope. That's the hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I do. I agree with you. I think they've got to park this very quickly now and review and start to preview what Stormers are. Hope the travel that will not impact them going back over there. But I do think that I watched Stormers last weekend. They've got a huge amount of threats. I don't think they're as physical. Like this could eat my words a couple of weeks time, but I don't think they're as physical as the Sharks. I think they play with a quicker tempo, and that might suit Munster, I think. But yeah, I just think that I'd imagine there'll be a huge defensive focus over the next couple of weeks, knowing and backing that, that if they have that work done and banked, that the attack will look after itself. Because I feel like that they're kind of on the same page now in relation to that. Obviously, you want to be fixing things and getting better all the time. But in terms of the structure and the systems, that they're definitely on form in terms of what their detail is. So, but yeah, look, I think they go and they get like how amazing would it be for them and their confidence if they go get a win over there? It'd be unbelievable, and it would be just reward for all the hard work, I think, from everybody involved in that group from November on, in terms of while we know there was a huge amount of work going on over that preseason first few weeks. I think once they got their mojo and their confidence around that November time, you and I both know that we don't always get what we deserve in the world of sport, but I do think that to go from the start to what they finished with over the last few weeks in between that, you'd love to see them just to get a win over there so that they could kind of get a better position to what they deserve on the basis of that they put such a good run together.
Yeah, it's hard to, we spoke a lot, Nave, about those two games and how you didn't want to be in a situation that you had to go and win. But this is where they find themselves. They've got to find something in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, the big thing for me is Europe next year. If you're trying to build, and we are in that phase of trying to build a stronger team, and that's what Graham Roundtree is doing. So good luck to them in the next few weeks. They need to be better than they were last Saturday in a good few areas, and hopefully they've addressed that and can be. That's it for episode 65. Thanks again, Neve. Probably went on talking a little bit about that, but the fans are, the podcast has always been about the fans as well and what they feel, and there's no point in berating the group. Everybody wants to see him get better, but there needs to be a little bit of no matter what happens and what way they finish the season, I think there needs to be a bit of a recalibration and real hard look again at where the club is going and how they can get better, and certain things probably need to change. Without kind of picking them out individually, I think we covered some of them. So that's it. Okay, thanks, Neve. Good luck. Enjoy free weekend. Are you back with Bows this weekend?
No, we're playing Old Belvedere in the last round of the penultimate round of the cup. So,
home or away?
Home.
All right, home comfort. So, well, good luck with that, and good luck in your prep for next week. Talk to you next week. Thanks.